Okay, we're live.
How's it going?
Hey, Kevin. Thanks so much for
Good to see
joining me
you.
on Inner Join. I've had you as
Always
a
a
friend
pleasure.
in this industry for some time. I think probably like since it's like fairly beginning stage of Select Star. We've known each other, but it's really great to have you on the show. So thanks for joining me.
It's always a pleasure talking with you, an old friend back, like you said, back when Select Star and Metaplane were but tadpoles. Maybe they were just like quantum particles, like glimmer in the eye, so to speak. Uh, yeah, I mean, and like how the industry has developed. We're going to be talking a lot about that today, I hope, but it's exciting. It's been a
Yeah,
very
it's
jam-packed few years.
for sure. Like I think every year of Select Star, I think there's been just the shifts and changes that's continuously happening in the data ecosystem, between the modern data stack to the Gen AI, and now towards the, should we call it data intelligence or all-in-one data platform, however you want to call it. It's really exciting and a crazy time to be in. So, uh, for the audience who hasn't gotten to know you yet, can you give us a quick intro of yourself and how you got into data?
My name is Kevin Hu. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a data observability company called Metaplane. We help companies like Bose and Ramp be the first to know of data quality issues before a customer pings them about some number looking weird or a product being broken. And we do this through pulling in metadata from throughout your data infrastructure and having automated anomaly detection and query parsing on top. So you get an incident, you get the context to understand the impact downstream and potential root causes. I got into data, I think in 2012-ish. My first language was the MongoDB query language, and the second one was Hive. I hope no one has to go through that again. And I got into data uh, through my sister. So I was studying physics at the time, and my older sister, was studying fish, specifically tilapia. Uh, Tilapia are from the central and eastern regions of Africa where they're very small lakes. And when an animal grows up in a small, constrained habitat, they become very territorial. So, as it turns out, tilapia, in addition to being tasty, are very territorial animals. So, if we drop one into a tank, the rest of them start changing their behavior and how they look.
Hmm.
So, after 6 years, she messages me being like, "Oh, Kevin, can you help me analyze some data? I never learned R." And I thought that was crazy, right? I thought, like, my sister is one of the smartest people I know. Older siblings always are, and yet she can't answer the questions she has about the data that she collected, that she can reason about, because she never learned how to code. Uh, and as it turns out, this is the case for most people and most companies, right? There's kind of a bottleneck when it comes to understanding and reasoning with data. So that's how I got into the computer science world, building tools to automate data analysis. And that slowly morphed into Metaplane because at the end of the day, in the real world, data is almost never clean. In the academic setting, for sure, right? We can start with the CSV, let our models run wild, but in the real world, we have upstream issues. And hopefully with Metaplane, we can kind of till and fertilize the soil. Maybe someday someone will build an automated data analysis tool. But that's kind of where we are today. The industry has changed a lot since then in exciting ways, right? Snowflake and Redshift and BigQuery, they themselves were just glimmers in people's eyes back in like 2012, and they're the behemoths in this space.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing how it comes through. That's I actually didn't know how you got into data, so that was a fun story to hear. Actually, the way that I got started in data was
Yeah.
actually through R. I was a software engineer, and some microsystems research lab hired me to help building their sales forecasting model, and that was in R. So statistical modeling is how I
Yeah.
got into data. Um,
The
cool.
arrow.
So
You can't get away.
this is 17 years ago, so I'm dating myself. But
No.
fast forward, we're both at Snowflake Summit that happened last week. I will just add Databricks AI Data and AI Summit. It's been very interesting to observe these two behemoth companies that are really racing at crazy speed of adding features, functionalities, not just on the performance of the product, but also around user experience beyond just the data engineers and the data scientists. So with that, I wanted to dive in deeply since you've been part of a very important partner for Snowflake. Congratulations on a recent investment from Snowflake Ventures. And I understand that you also share a lot of customers with Snowflake. So yeah, curious, like from a lot of things, probably like, I don't know, list of like 25 things that Christian showed up on the keynote. What were like the aspects that kind of like was interesting to you? How do you feel like those things impact the data teams today and in the future? Maybe we can start with one thing and go after other things.
One quick note on the conference broadly is we talked beforehand how we saw each other on Monday and never saw each other again. It's like the sheer scale is immense, right? Like it's possible that we were never even in the same part of the Moscone Center at the same time.
Right.
So I'm happy that we can kind of reflect on the conference and share notes, because there's no one person that even saw like a reasonable fraction of the whole summit, right? And my experience was very centered on the observability side of the house. Like I went to the keynotes, I saw all of the amazing Cortex announcements, and we can talk about like the fine tuning and RAG. I maybe wanted to start off by talking about Snowflake Horizon, which relates to both of us, right?
Sure.
It's like it's a suite of governance features and partnerships. At least that's how I understand it. Where they within Snowflake now natively in Snowsight, you have lineage, you have like table statistics, you have clean room, you have RBAC, and you have observability tools like Metaplane and catalogs like Select Star that kind of all cohesively come together into like a level up, create your own governance experience. And I'm very curious how this will turn out, both in terms of how deep Snowflake chooses to go on various features, especially because they're a database, they're a data cloud company, right, on the infra and data layer, not necessarily an application building layer. But also we have like how they negotiate the partnerships, and most importantly, how customers adopt these technologies. Maybe it's different types of customers prefer to use Snowflake Horizon, or other types of customers need a standalone tool. I think the ecosystem dynamics are going to be very interesting, and I'm curious about your take. What do you think about Horizon?
Yeah, I mean, so I also kind of see it as more of like a capability of data governance is starting to become more and more important for these data cloud providers. Primarily because they've been first focused on making sure their customers loading the data is actually scaling and is actually working on that data platform. But then now, as more customers are starting to query those data and try to utilize those data, it is becoming more necessary to make sure that the data is well organized, access is controlled, and there is, nothing that might come off as a risk for them. So I see Snowflake Horizon as one of these important keys of completing like your data governance. A lot of the nuts and bolts that you may need to ensure the security access and also like overall like governance documentation to be part of like your Snowflake instance. So I think for both of us as Snowflake partners, it is more of like an ecosystem that we are starting to leverage, because the Snowflake is now starting to provide more information about, for example, data lineage, what they call quote unquote data. I don't know if they call it quality, yeah, but I think it's called data quality metrics, where you can see kind of like the null counts, duplicate counts, things like that, right? You can do more access control through the tag-based and role-based access control. So I think like a lot of that, they are starting to provide more of these nuts and bolts capabilities for people to kind of put together how that maps to their databases, going forward.
Yeah, no, you made me think of the possible, easy, obvious framework of like with data quality metrics, like these higher level functions. It's now a primitive in Snowflake that you can run it, get a metric back. If you want to store, for example, the mean of a numeric metric, a very classic thing that is tracked in Metaplane, right? Like I like the building blocks. Right now, it's possible to do that yourself. Maybe the next step is to make it very easy, and then to make it obvious. Uh, I yeah, I really appreciate the fact that Snowflake is like giving a nod to the importance of trust in data, right? Okay,
Sure.
now you have it, and now you're using it, but now you need to trust it,
Mm-hmm.
especially before AI. Wow, everyone, like how many vendors talked about AI at Summit?
Yeah, of course, everybody had AI on their booth. I feel like we should have also put AI on her booth, but now we do. We have to submit the graphic so long ago. But like I think everyone now assumes that you have some capabilities with AI, so maybe that's still we have passed that point. But speaking of AI, let's talk about Cortex and the new updates that Snowflake released around it. I feel like overall, like I wasn't really paying attention on the Cortex capability, but I talked to a number of customers that were starting to use them and use them pretty heavily. So was quite surprised that the adoption was like higher than I anticipated. And the fact that you can basically run these functions um, just really easily as part of your SQL query, to me, it was like just kind of mind blowing.
I think we talk so much about model capabilities, right? GPT-3 versus 3.5 versus 4 versus Mistral. And ultimately that is the engine, but I think the modality of interacting with models is a little under discussed, right? Like GPT has been around for a while, but then when you have chat in front of it, right now this is a tool that's adopted and can bring in billions of dollars in revenue for OpenAI. Now with the 4.0, like have you used the voice feature by chance?
I've used it lightly, but I prefer to do just the typing mostly.
Yeah, okay, so maybe this is like a different types of people, but if you ever are like cooking a meal, you could have just like
Mhm.
4.0 like an Alexa, and my partner thinks I'm nuts, but you just like have it on all the time and interacting with it, and it really changes how I use ChatGPT. Uh, and I think the same thing is true when you have LLMs available through SQL. Right now, engineers can obviously pull data from Snowflake, uh, like post that to an API and get a result back, and like that's not technically very complicated, but just the ease of having it in SQL and like flipping through the model registry and now being able to have fine tuning and RAG is, I mean, I am very excited to see what like qualitatively this is able to allow engineers like what it's able to allow them to build more than just making it faster to iterate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that just the part we're kind of still like scratching the surface here. And I see that data quality and understanding the metadata is going to be a lot more important, or should I call it augmented slash active metadata to be like super important here, because like this is like something that we see all the time, right? You try to build a chatbot, and because you now have an AI capability in your data warehouse, but then like it's just hallucinating, it's not giving you the right answers. So like where do you go from here? And I think that's kind of like the next step that Snowflake will and others will need to solve. This, and I think that this is going to be very much correlated, like this kind of is like kind of how I envision where data warehouses or where data lakes will go, right? Also part of the features that I've been requesting Snowflake was like, hey, like you guys are seeing and indexing all my data or customers' data anyway. Why can't you profile them and then like give us a like a good version, like you're already doing them from the queries? And I think a lot of that will start getting embedded into this AI or Cortex analysts, because data quality is so critical to really make anything work.
Yeah, it ties in a little bit with, okay, I'll be the first to say the name of Databricks. Databricks' AI BI announcement. So for the record, most of our customers are on Snowflake. We use Snowflake, but Shinji, we had to talk about it at some point, and that I'm not surprised that Databricks is building a BI tool. Right? I mean, this is like it's the jugular vein of data. Like it has been the first use case of data for the past 60 years. It will be the last use case of data, which is the answer to the question, how is my business doing? Is this a correct decision? And what I think is novel is how they purport, and I believe them, to be using like query history and data profiling to infer semantics about the data, and to use that to power more like text to insight like experience. But and I think that this is going to help address, or at least like is a reasonable attempt at addressing the semantic layer problem, right? The cold start problem of like, now you're sitting down, you have like a nice well-modeled, you have a set of data models, but then it's like, okay, now to build a semantic model from scratch. If you can bootstrap that based on the queries that analysts are actually writing, you can convince yourself that that's very powerful. What I'm bumping up against is the question, like how much of your semantics can be inferred, right? Or another way to phrase it is like how much it lives in people's brains and you have to extract it from their brains, right?
Yeah,
I don't have a good answer.
I have an opinion about that. My opinion on this is that a lot of the semantics, well, it's not going to be 100%. Yes, there will always be something in people's brains like that it might not have been captured. But I would say that a lot of the times the true semantics have been captured within the BI tools today. Your custom measures and custom SQLs that are running on top of Power BI and Tableau. These are things that analysts have to build on top of the data models that they got from data engineers or analytics engineers, because it is something that the business really wanted to see, and that's how it should be calculated. And it doesn't make sense for them to put a change upstream. And because like we see a lot of this as LXR, and just it's just like almost impossible to build a separate semantic layer or like your metrics tree, because like you can start from one place, but then it's a lot of hand holding and then herding cats in order to make that truly work throughout the organization. So I feel like the layer of semantic level building will have to be continuous, and it will have to be it should definitely start from like a good basis, whether that is coming from interviewing your stakeholders and having someone to actually define what the metric tree and the dimensions and core measures would look like. But the main part of like, in order for the semantics to be current and correct, it has to read through the behaviors of end users. This is actually a little bit separate from AI BI, but I think, to be honest, most of the stuff that Databricks has done and announced this year, yes, I agree, is pretty like game changing. It's pretty powerful, in my opinion. And a lot of that has happened, starting from their introduction of Unity Catalog. I feel like their Unity Catalog introduction is almost like maybe the Trojan horse. It's like maybe that's not the right like analogy, but like it's like a one thing that you feel like, oh, like Hive Metastore distributed everywhere is hard to manage. Let's have them on one place. But then that started giving this a whole like structure and understanding to Databricks of how the data is being utilized and where it's going to, so on and so forth, where they are now starting to truly leverage that to build AI BI, their access control, which is like now attribute based, and more. And I think this is like it's still like scratching the surface, right? Because like we saw the demo from the keynote versus like a real demo is quite different. There's a lot of limitations right now, but like the direction of where it's heading kind of shows the industry like where the kind of like this overall data cloud can become. That's kind of how I felt. And yeah, I think we got here actually while we were talking about AI.
Right. But now that you mentioned the C word, I did want of catalog. I was wondering if you could help me and the audience understand what Polaris catalog is and how it's different from a data catalog.
Sure. This has been some questions that we got from our booth at Snowflake. And this kind of like still actually is like one of the things that like I generally don't like calling ourselves as a catalog, even though we are in the data catalog segment. And that's because everybody has a catalog. Well, if you have information schema or a list of schemas, then it's a catalog, right? So, but the data catalogs like us, Alasian, Calibra, Atlan, like we are actually a lot more than just a list of schemas and on a search, right? We provide lineage, usage, understanding, so on and so forth. It's like a full fledged of your data discovery tool. So that's why we always call ourselves more of data discovery platform. But Polaris catalog is more of this technical catalog. I would say it is a information schema and a place where it stores the iceberg tables that you can easily access. So for us, it's not that Polaris. So for us, like we like for when we say we are integrating with iceberg formats, it actually means we're integrating with Polaris or Glue or a different catalog that supports iceberg format and bring out the file formats into tables, columns, and schema formats. So that's kind of how like I've explained it, because Polaris catalog compared to the general data catalogs are just quite a different we're talking about apples and oranges, even though they are called both catalogs. But going into iceberg and why Snowflake released Polaris catalog, I think it is definitely a big move for Snowflake to continue go down the path of supporting more workloads and workloads beyond just the analytics. Iceberg format certainly makes it so much more effective or efficient efficient querying on top of file systems compared to Parquet. And I think this is something that a lot of companies are switching over to, so that or augmenting, moving towards, so that this is going to be just more of a de facto standard, I would say, in the next few years down the road. So for Snowflake to support that automatically is really, I think, just a testament for Snowflake to continue support not just the open ecosystem, but more for like all data workloads that happens in the enterprise environment.
Totally. And just to like put a cap on that distinction, so it's like file format, like how data is stored on disk in S3, Parquet. You have a table format like Iceberg. You have a catalog like Polaris, and you have a data discovery tool like Select Star. So it goes like, there's a couple layers up. Is that a correct way to say it?
That's what I would say, yeah. Because we currently integrate with Glue Catalog. Glue Catalog gives us the table formats and all those columns that are coming from S3 files. It basically understands the Parquet file formats coming from all the S3 files. Now, and it's not now, actually, about a year ago, Glue Catalog started supporting Iceberg formats. So, we just integrate with Glue Catalog, and what we get from Glue is actually the same. Like, doesn't matter what the file format was based on. And so that's kind of like, but the part that is for us, like, it's because we are primarily tracking the metadata. Whereas for others, when you are trying to run a Flink streaming job or some EMR job or some Databricks like Spark jobs or notebooks, like these formats actually matter, especially when you are trying to do like a large amount of, should I say, MapReduce functions on top of the data. So
yes, that which ties into what you just talked about, which is like the proliferation and diversity of workload types on top of data, where like we didn't even talk about yet, like Snowflake notebooks and the Pandas API, which definitely is close to my heart, right?
yeah.
It's such a quality of life improvement to, even the most trivial thing, like not having to put in your Snowflake creds at the top of your Jupyter notebook running locally. These things add up. But having the ergonomics for like the Python data science notebooking workflow, Snowpark container services is, I feel like, is not getting the hype that it deserves. It's like, come on, running like, hosting and executing arbitrary like, containers on Snowflake compute, it's huge, especially if you're building applications. And speaking of which, this application development workflow, which you pointed out before, as distinct from the data engineering workflow, is it's something that Snowflake definitely is doubling down on, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this is
Snowflake
why
Trail.
they invested so much also in, after the Streamlit acquisition, they've been really trying to build that community for developers to continue to build applications on top of Snowflake, which I think is quite noble. Because that is like a quite not the direction that other competitors are going after. But I think a Snowflake's mind is that at the end of the day, whether it's an analytics or applications, they're all gonna need to have its own backbone, which comes down to data. And I think that's really Snowflake is trying to get at, that it's all the same data. Sure, it is perhaps transformed, modified, aggregated maybe different ways, but it all comes down to like, where is that data stored, and they want to provide different views and use cases, whether it's going to be used for application or streaming or sharing data, or to analyze and build models on top.
Which I think is a very, very strong bet, where if if we think that the future is like trending towards iceberg, or like in general, you have your own data lake and bring compute engines on top. Snowflake can lean into their strengths as with having an amazing compute engine and all these layers of abstraction, all of the toolkits, as you referred to before, on
Yeah.
top.
So yeah. So to me, like the quite like a major difference between like Snowflake and Databricks is that Snowflake focuses a lot more on that application workload, the directionally compared to Databricks, where they are now trying to go after more BI analytical workloads. Because like I think the Spark jobs and Spark just overall has been utilized. Like they have a big footprint on both machine learning as well as for um, just like a general data processing overall.
Yes, that which is the fact that in 30 minutes we can talk about both AI, Cortex fine tuning, as well as like iceberg tables, like the most low level as like file table formats. It brings to mind this question of like, are we building for the future, or are we building for the past? Right. On one hand, it's very we see where things are trending with LLMs and the adoption of AI, both in consumer and enterprise settings. On the other hand, right, like Oracle, like they made $50 billion last year, right? And that's greater than the market cap of Snowflake and probably Databricks, right? It's like the amount of like revenue, or the amount of market share from like legacy database vendors. And I know that they're not, it's comparing apples and oranges, right? But it's still like a data store used for enterprise use cases that I wonder how Snowflake and Databricks think about cannibalizing the huge amount of market share kind of locked away currently. Maybe the
Yeah,
focus on iceberg is one way to get at it.
sure. Yeah, I mean, just overall, in terms of companies moving from legacy databases to more cloud-based oriented databases, this work is continuing to happen. There's
Yeah.
still lots of market for both Snowflake and Databricks to go after. So yeah.
Yes.
So going back to the Cloud Summit announcements, do you want to tell us a little bit more about Snowflake Trail? I
Uh,
actually wasn't aware of this, but like as I'm starting to look it up, it's like a pretty exciting thing, especially for application developers.
I am very excited about Snowflake Trail. Snowflake Trail is telemetry for Snowflake. So it adheres to the open telemetry spec. So you have distributed tracing on Snowpark and really on all the code that you execute within Snowflake. So to make it really concrete, you might emit some metrics related to a stored procedure. You have the beginning and the end, and then you can decompose it by spans, like every single line that's being executed along the, within the stack trace. And now you have visibility into basically all the code that runs on your data, and not just the high level performance and execution status of the code. Two things I'm really excited about. One is that the team is amazing. The team that is working on Snowflake Trail, Ashwin, Aaron, Bogdan, Bogdan was one of the co-founders of OpenTelemetry when he was at Google. And they're just so on and dedicated to building an amazing developer experience that I think Snowflake might be the data cloud that finally bridges this gap between code and data observability. So if you'll let me, rant for a minute here, it's like,
Okay.
you know, Datadog, Splunk, SignalFX. You install an agent, you send over traces, and that's great. But you don't understand the status of the data within your systems. But then, it's led to the rise of data observability tools like Metaplane, Monte Carlo, Anomalo, Big Eye, which now tells you about the status of the data, but we're kind of missing the code component, right? But you really need both, because if the data is incorrect, it means that the code has not executed correctly, right? So you need kind of both the status of data and the status of code execution to really have, well, one, a good like reactive debugging process instead of having a bunch of tabs open, but ideally proactively being able to anticipate and prevent data quality and code quality issues in the future. So I'm pumped about Snowflake Trail. I'm super excited to be working closely with their team, and I think this really is highlighting how much Snowflake is investing in the developer experience of building on Snowflake, which is very, very cool across the board.
Just help me understand, how does this actually work? So I read that it's an agentless setting. So how do they collect these logs and metrics from the application itself if it doesn't run inside the application?
It's all being admitted to an event table. And so you log events like the start and end of the trace and any metadata. When, for example, you're in Snowpark and you're executing you're running a stored procedure, so you have lines at the beginning and at the end that are emitting this metadata.
I see. So this happens actually if I am using Snowpark container services and my code is running in that container. And is that where the telemetry is getting picked up from?
Yeah, I believe they're working on it for container services. The most common runtime that I've seen is Snowpark.
Okay, got it. Inside Snowpark containers.
Right. Yeah,
got
exactly.
It. Cool. I wasn't aware of that, so this was actually cool to learn. Have you gone to any of the sessions at the Snowflake Summit? Anything notable that you enjoyed listening in?
This is one of the downsides of being a partner. Is how to you don't. At least I don't manage to go to enough sessions as much as I want to. I'm waiting for the recording so I can kind of like binge watch them. You know what I mean? Is like eat some dinner, like 1.5x watch. I enjoy the announcements of Trail, and specifically how they brought a customer in from Optimove to talk about how they use Trail with Datadog to kind of go through a whole debugging process. My favorite speaker of all time, though, is John Adams from VideoAmp. Not only an incredible person, but also a great speaker talking about migrating on-premise Spark to Snowpark and why it worked so well compared to, let's call it, managed Spark solutions.
Mm-hmm. Got it. But, very cool.
Yeah. What about you?
Yeah, during the conference, so for me, it's a very like a special time to be like, I'm not in my front of my computer because usually I work from home and like sometimes I never get out of the house. But like, I'm surrounded by very much like-minded people, like other founders or like data practitioners and executives. And it's just like a really exciting time to just be around the conference. So a lot of the times I do spend times in meetings and also expo halls, like if we have a booth and just checking out other booths as well. But I always try to attend some sessions. This is just something that kind of got me more like focused and like also learn what are the things that companies actually think about and really excited about. I think one of the things that I always like find in these technical conferences is not just about how we solve the problem, but more also like where are we going next? because we all understand that it's not end all be all. It's a continuous improvement of our processes and technologies that, as our business needs also evolve. So one of the sessions that I really enjoyed when I was at Snowflake Summit was this session around security and governance by Canva. So Canva, as you know, is also a huge company. I think they hit what, 2 billion revenue last year, and they have a fairly really strong dedicated data team, also focused on data security and data privacy. So data privacy obviously is very important for Canva as a consumer or direct-to-consumer company, and they have implemented this notion of this like time to live, but based on policy. So they call it like policies based like time to live tables, where they use the role-based access control for deletion of any consumer data when they get requested. But then instead of deleting those rows directly right away, they actually kind of like hide it using the masking rule, so that it's kind of a quote unquote soft delete to ensure that everything else, or there's like a no, like a I don't know, like a crazy downstream effect that's happening. Basically, because each of the tables and the way that tables are created is almost just like a downstream jobs or downstream models that happen. Once they apply the rows to be deleted, or it's time to live is like a limited end for certain rows that's related to a user. This happens at the most left side of the table, and then from there they re-trigger all their jobs to build the tables afterwards, so they don't have to worry about any other reporting or transformation that needs to happen afterwards. So I've just,
Very cool.
this is a concept that, like, we talk a lot about within like data governance, right? What's the retention policy? How do you manage the sensitive data? How do you ensure that this person has access to like the actual data versus aggregation, and vice versa? We want this person to have aggregated type of data, but not the specific rows. Or how do you ensure that one person has access to both tables, but different rows, for example, so that you don't see the overlap of like the IDs, so that you cannot like trace like what has happened between the user IDs, for example. Like there are a lot of cases like this that is starting to really emerge as we are starting to consolidate all disparate sources of data in one place. I felt like the approach that they took to automate that process of data deletion was very interesting.
That is very, very cool. I have like the ability to have both the automated like soft deletion and the propagation downstream. It's like, yeah, those are like the granular control and making sure that it flows all the way through. I mean, every time I've had to do something like this, those are the biggest pains in the butt.
Right.
So
And I think this is like why, tools like DBT or I guess that starts more doing orchestration, but the way to basically chain your ETL pipeline and be able to control that execution, so that it's not just like about, when so it's not just about the recurring jobs, but then for you to have that full visibility of what type of data is going where. And I think that this, like having that visibility and understanding is so important for data security and privacy as well.
One day people are going to start asking us for a row level lineage, and that's going to be
exactly. I mean, right now, even just the column level lineage is like where this is like primarily also being used for. But it got me thinking about, what would the row level lineage would look like,
Yes, and like if it would be possible outside of, I mean, that's one thing that I'm glad Snowflake is starting to build stronger support for lineage, both in terms of making the data available and for including in the UI, is like, every single vendor, only we can just do our best to make it, fully comprehensive and fully accurate. But Snowflake has the source of truth,
Right.
They have the query plan. So, but yeah, I'm excited for that and excited to see what kind of lineage they make available to us.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's going to be really interesting. Because I think a lot of the value proposition also, it like our value proposition just gets more stronger. The better source of truth that we can refer to that comes from our integration partners.
100%.
So cool, awesome. So we have about 15 minutes left. I would love to hear your thoughts about what is coming up next for Snowflake, and from what you've heard from this recent announcements of Databricks, what you feel like is coming next for Databricks or any other data platform, because Snowflake and Databricks are not the only ones. Like, there are a lot of companies that are still using Redshift. BigQuery is a big one. Like, I think there are a lot of different options for data teams to choose. It's a very exciting time to be part of this industry today. So.
Yeah, and not to mention Salesforce. I feel like people don't talk about their acquisition of Tableau enough, besides bemoaning the death of Tableau. But it's like, they have the source of truth. I mean, like, they have CRM data, right? What's one of the first things that you ELT over from Fivetran? It's like they have a chance at making a play here too. And I'll give a cop-out answer, then I'll give a real answer. The cop-out answer is like everything that's not in GA yet. I was very impressed by the amount of GA announcements, but like something as big as hybrid tables, I'm very excited to see reach GA. I feel like having the ability to like have transactional workloads on top of Snowflake is like, it's massive for building.
Can you explain what hybrid tables are for those who are not familiar with it?
Yes. So Snowflake is an OLAP database, or I wouldn't call them a database, but
I would say columnar. But yeah.
Yeah, a columnar data store optimized for analytical queries.
Right.
Something like Postgres is a OLTP database optimized for transactional queries, like getting a single row, a single transaction. And Snowflake is, and any columnar data store is not optimal for these transactional queries. And unfortunately, in a lot of, when you're building like software applications, much of the data that you want to persist and retrieve is a transaction, right? Like a user logs in, they do this event, right? They get some data, like, you need to support these transactional workloads. And what hybrid tables allow you to do, I think they might call it Unistore now, is to not have to choose between one or the other. You kind of like upgrade a table to be a transactional table. I'm not using the right terminology here, but they managed to crack the puzzle of like, replicating the data so that you have both.
Got it. That's really cool.
It's very cool.
Especially
it's a huge
supports like the event formats, because like most of the activity data comes in more of like an event format, and there is a lot of basically processing, like data processing, that you have to build in to make that usable for analytical purposes today.
That's a whole nother very, very large use case for this, 100%. And they announced it previously. I'm excited to see it out there in GA. I'm also excited to see, this is a very small thing, but returning tabular data from stored procedures, like maybe most of the people on this call say, okay, you had to like hack together some string concatenation to get table back. But it's these small ergonomic things that got a lot of people to love Snowflake to begin with. So But the higher level prediction, to actually answer your question, is for them to double down into the developer experience as a broad statement, but like very specifically to bring multiple pieces into like a unified developer experience that someone might expect if they were bringing their own tools, right? Their own code editors, tighter coupling with version control, the tracing and logging, the different deployment environments, like having staging environments versus prod environments to build data applications, multiple entry points for multiple languages. Like it's a hazy picture for me, at least personally. I'm sure the product team at Snowflake is, has a much more clear picture of the world, but there's so much for them to do. And they have the data and the compute engine, so they're in a great position to capitalize on it. But
yeah, actually, I mean, there are so many things released that I actually wasn't aware of. This getting tabular data from stored procedures. Is this kind of like showing the access history from stored procedures, kind of like what they're doing for queries today?
Oh, I was, if they do that, please let me know because I would love that. It's like really the return value after calling a stored procedure,
Got
instead
it.
of a string or a number.
But like within the part of the within the processes of a stored procedure, so you can like
yes,
debug it better.
right, and like almost like if you're chaining stored procedures or different functions,
Right.
like passing through tables all the way through. What about you on the Databricks prediction side? Honestly, I haven't been following as closely, so it's hard for me to have an informed opinion.
Yeah, no, all good. I think I guess my take from Snowflake is that I see that they are definitely investing a lot on this developer ecosystem because they are also pushing on like this native app marketplace a lot,
Yes.
right? And it's a good value proposition. For enterprises, I don't want the data to leave outside of my Snowflake instance. I would rather have these applications to just house on top. It's going to use my data anyway. So could that just like live within? So to me, like almost like, Snowflake is like going towards like trying to become an AWS type of company where like, different like applications and not just like data workloads live within. And regarding that, a lot of the updates that they made on Snowsite, I think has been meaningful, and I think those will continue to improve. Is basically my prediction. But obviously, they do have to probably continue to support all the data workloads because that is also their bread and butter. For Databricks, a lot of the things in a way like that were launched this past week has been like I think there are a few things. One is like there was a lot of talk about the performance and cost. And for them, because majority of Databricks customers, or at least the usage that I was aware of in the past, has really been on the cloud provider side. So it's really that data science and machine learning jobs that run on Databricks, but then the data it wasn't really accessed or managed or queried directly from those S3 either through like a Dina or even EMR jobs. And by reducing so much cost or performance side of things, I think that this is a very attractive component for a lot of enterprises to consider moving into Databricks. They are also doing a ton of this kind of like more trying to make like bring your own data into Databricks or use Databricks to share data with others. It doesn't have to be migrated to our platform. Like that's kind of like the different approach. And again, like lot of things will be continuing to build on top of the core, like what I would call like, it's like kind of like almost like a Databricks Cortex, not like Snowflake Cortex, but as the meaning of the just Cortex as a word, for powering their like AI engine, like enterprise AI. When we think about enterprise AI being specific to the data that you have, I think this part about understanding what that data looks like, where what are the important data to use versus not, and understanding where they trace through. Like this is like all really, really important information. And really data discovery for ML and AI to leverage that better is really, I think, where like Databricks has kind of like shown like what the potential is, and that's probably like where they are also heading as well. And I feel like a lot of the overall data platform, also like these are things that will just make the platform experience like so much better whenever an analyst wants to make a like issue a query or run a job, or a business person like wanting to learn more about a subject X. It's not just about like the query they issue, but the actual query plan and the what gets queried, like all of that, to be aware of not just the technical aspect of what we have, but also what is the correct semantics, and what, like out of like 50 different customer tables, what is the right one to use. This, I feel like, is where the industry is heading towards, regarding like when you're providing a data platform. So yeah, very much of like a exciting and kind of like a like crazy thing to like witness the last couple of weeks. Yeah, for me.
Yeah, I mean, what a privilege it is to work in this space. It's and also to see these two giants like duke it out for the good of everyone in the market, right? And to see them both embrace like how important it is to have metadata about your data and to have trust in your data in two different ways. But I think for a very, very long time, we were so focused on right moving the data from A to B to run a query on it, right? And the governance kind of was shouldered on the people level. And the more that we can shift it to the tools, or at least to have tools help us with questions of governance, that's what's going to let us go up the ladders of abstraction here. Otherwise, we're never going to get to the point where we can, confidently have LLMs fine-tune on our structured data if we don't even trust it. So yeah, I feel like next year we're going to have a very different conversation.
Yeah, and I think more companies, and including enterprises, are like willing to give it a try. And I think a lot of people have also migrated to this mindset of we gotta just get started on something on like a smaller level, rather than trying to do like everything like as a waterfall, like one step at a time. Like I was sitting in one of the customer sessions by Shell yesterday, and that was like primarily just about how they implemented their data governance strategy. And the speaker was talking about how like difficult it is to actually implement after having a whole data strategy. But the only way that this has worked for the company was because first they took a phased approach, and two, they were working very specifically for specific business cases throughout the full stack. And it's like, if you feel like you want to do something with Gen AI, you do need a better data platform, but it doesn't necessarily mean all your data has to move. You can specifically define what those data will look like, and then have it go through the whole process, right? And because the market is changing so quickly, just making sure that you can keep and understand what those metadata look like and can be portable to different platforms, I think it's also important. It's like kind of basically what he pointed out, which I wholeheartedly agree with. And both Snowflake and Databricks are really making that now happen, both very much dedicated into like one providing the open table format, and then the other, because like Databricks also open source unique catalog, so that you can basically export the metadata that you have. So yeah, I think the other part about this is like the next level, like, ways for companies to continue to provide their mode is going to, or preference between the customers is going to start coming back to the user experience of the product, is my opinion.
Which it'll be interesting. I know we're at a time where I feel like when a lot of people talk about open table formats, we're imagining this beautiful world where every company has all of their data in S3 and they can swap out and choose the compute that they want on top. But it's like, okay, we just want to write a query, right?
Right.
We want, how many companies want to put data somewhere else, don't have to think about it again. Obviously enterprises are very different, but at least in the mid-market and SMB, it's like the less I think about, the better. So I don't have a prediction for adoption or what will change by next year, but I will be following it very closely.
Amazing. Well, thanks so much for joining me today, Kevin. I had a great time chatting with you, and I think it's a very exciting time to be in. So let's chat again soon about how market's going next time.
We are overdue. The 2025 Summit recap.
All right. Well, have a good weekend. I will talk to you later.
Talk soon. Bye.
Bye.